Hello, Commodores, captains and Black Seas enthusiasts. Today we are going to teach everybody how to rig their beautifully painted ships. On the table you can see the essential tools needed for the task. Although, you can possibly use similar tools for it. I feel these are the essentials. So you have some kind of scissors, obviously the rigging thread, tweezers, some wooden implement. You can definitely use a toothpick for dabbing glue, and a scalpel, and obviously your beautifully painted ships. It also is useful to always have the guide from the Black Seas book to make sense of it all. You have to be really, really careful when rigging most of the stages that I will describe. The rigging needs to go on top of the yard, not underneath the yard. It has to go on top of the yard. This is because later on when you put the sails on, the sails will fit on the yard, and if the thread goes underneath the yard, then that will prevent the sails from being able to be attached to the yard itself. So just be really, really careful. You don't want the thread to start from and tie it underneath the yard. You want to tie it above the yard. So I'll just go ahead and do it the right way. But as before, you want a very short length. Of string. You can make a knot when the thread is not on yet in place, and then you just place it where it has to go, making sure it goes over the correct yards. There you go, above the yard, not below. So the knot is pretty solid as it is. However, we will use a small dab of glue to seal it in place. The second knot, you go around and use some tweezers to just create the second knot. Use the tweezer to push it down if you have to. And a further dab of glue to seal it in place. As soon as you've done this, the glue will dry very quickly. I'm using super glue. And you can then trim the excess lines using the scissors, or if you keep them taut, can even use the scalpel. And that is the first stage complete. I'm not wanting to say this again, but I will. As you can see, it goes above the yard so that once the sails will be put in, they can be fitted underneath in full contact with the yard itself. Stage number 2. In the book, both these stages are part of stage number 1. So I should say stage number 1.2. In this stage, you take a slightly longer length of thread. And pretty much in the middle, you will create a knot. Like you did before, but before we kept it as much as possible on the extremities. In this case, you do it fairly central, and you want this to go on the main mast. Just above the bottom yard. Without getting all entangled. There you go. And you tighten it up just above the top yard. Like so, and like before, like every stage that we will do, you want to dab a little bit of super glue on the knot itself, being quick to tighten it up. It takes seconds for the glue to dry out. So you want to be putting the glue and tighten it up quite quickly. This creates two ends to the thread. One end we will lead to the bowsprit, go around it, and use tweezers to make another simple knot. At the base of the bowsprit, going on the left of the foremast. And sealing this knot with a small dab of glue. The second thread you want it to go around the base of the foremast. As I said, tweezers are not essential, but they're really, really welcome. In fact, no, I said tweezers are essential. I said describe them as essential tools, in fact. I do believe they are, truly. So we want to pop this in and make a very simple knot, as you can see. Then tighten that up. You want it to be at the base, so we can push this down with the tweezers. And by keeping it taut with them two fingers, dab a little bit of glue there to seal it in place. Trim off the excess. By the way, these are Derek's very own weird scissor things. Thank you, Derek. They're kind of cute. I have normal nail scissors, but then again, I'm not Derek. So here you go. Stage number 2. I don't want to be too repetitive on this. However, because I myself make this mistake many, many times, observe how the knot is on top of the yard, not underneath. It's on top of the yard. All knots will be done and tied just on top of the yard. In this case, you don't need to put any sails on that yard. However, it's just good practice just to do them all on top of the yard, with the one on the right being tied to the base, and the one on the left, oh no, bit of glue, no panic. The one on the left, I was saying, being tied to the base of the bowsprit. Book stage 1 complete, with the 2 subsections. There is just a little bit of some more excess than I'd like, so I'm just going to trim that off a little bit more. This is going to be stage 2 of the rigging process. So we've done the stage 1, which is 2 subsettings. So for stage 2, you want a slightly longer, although still not too long. So maybe, what's that? A foot-ish, if you're an Imperial Roman kind of length. So it's that kind of length. And you want to tie the first knot in the same place, again above the yard. I'm not going to stop saying that. Exactly where the previous knot was, just above it, but essentially in the same place. So, as always, I find it easier to just make a knot before the thread is, having said that, I'm just not doing it, but there you go, simple knot on the thread. And this can be just laid down exactly on top of the yard where the other one was. And I'm even going to help it to just be further down. There you go. Seal it. Quickly tighten it. Brilliant. What you want to do then is take it to just above the yard. Always above the yard. You go around once. It's not showing very well. There you go. So this is around, and then you want to go under. I don't, at this stage, as such, tie it. There you go. There you go. No, there I don't go. Were you paying attention? Part of this went underneath because of the twisting and twining. But it really has to go above. Now, it can happen quite often that the thread will go underneath. And you'll realize it when you have to put the sails on and they just won't go on. So here you can see it. Around, under, and then I'm going to tighten it up. And go behind. This should be really underneath the top. So it's just above that. Now from here, you want to go up. And in fact, at this stage, probably is a good idea to just seal it, because this element, this will create the loop of where one of the future stages will have to thread through. So I want it to be a fairly secure seal. So I'm just going to wait for a couple of seconds. This then wants to go to just above the top yard of the mizzen mast, the rear mast. Now, this should go around and underneath. I find it very useful to just do a little loop-the-loop of the thread. And to place that on top. Went off shot there. There you go. And once you've done that, this will be brought to just above the middle yard of the main mast. It goes around. and underneath. There's no wanting to go underneath. Now, each of these stages you can, if you want to, seal it with glue, probably preserve your sanity. I usually, for the sake of speed, just carry on, and even if there's a bit of slack, tighten everything up at the end. So as you can see, it's above. Now, the plastic masts are beautifully amazing. However, they do bend quite a lot. So just be careful to tighten it enough, but not too much. It then will go around the foremast, still just above the yard, always just above the yard, and then under and the head. I said I would do this the other way around because the book shows the ship the other way around, and I've just fallen into my rigging pattern, which is usually doing it the other way around, but I'm just gonna turn it around and try it again. By the way, I have two beautiful assistants here, which if they ever see the ship going out of shot, can just kind of remind me of it, because I'm alternating the view from looking at the actual ship to looking at the actual shop, and sometimes it goes out of focus or out of shot. So as you can see, I don't want to tighten it too much. Went from the knot to just above the yard, to middle yard, to just above the top yard, to just above the middle yard of the main mast, to just above the bottom yard of the foreyard. And this will be then tied roughly halfway down the bowsprit. Now you can make a knot, but as I always, and as we always seal it with some glue, on this occasion, just a dab of glue. If you put too much, don't be shy, just put your fingers in it. It's only glue. And there you go, that's the end of the second stage done, apart from the trimming of the excess. So as you can see, stage 2 is done, and it has created a little bit of a gap here that we will need in stage 3. Want a fairly long piece of, in fact, the longest piece of string to date. Possibly an arm length or an armful. That's what the nurse tells me when I give blood. No, that's what I tell her. She's a bit bored of it now. As always, you can make the knot. I find it way easier to just make the knot outside, not when it's not on the mast. And then tighten it when it's on the mast. Now, this knot and this stage will be repeated for all 3 masts. It's fairly similar, except where the thread end is looped what bits is looped over, but you want to go roughly halfway between the yard and the top of the mast. And then you want to seal that with some glue. Brilliant. This gets very, very tangly because the thread is so long. So what you want to do on this stage, and all the next, the same stages are used for all the masts. So this is the one for the mizzen mast, which is where you start. In order to allow the thread to be threaded through the pre-cut holes in the plastic kits, you want to stiffen up the thread by dabbing it into a blob of glue. And once it's in, just stiffen it up. So that it has a bit of strength when needing to go through the hole. These holes are pre-cut, as I was saying, in the plastic kits. You will have to drill them out in roughly in the same position on the resin and metal kits. The first hole is that one. There's a corresponding one on the other side of the ship. Really important, going in the hole from the correct size. So the first time you go through it from the outside of the ship towards the inside of the ship. You can see it's gone through. And then simply by taking some tweezers, just make it go all through. Now, there is the easier way of doing this, which is what is represented in the book, or the slightly sturdier way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the easier way that is on the book. So otherwise you repeat this process twice, going into a different, but I won't go into it. I'm just going to go and do the easier way. I've gone down and in the hole, and then what I want to do is to go through the gap that I've created with the previous stage, which is right there. I've seen many comments talking about rigging being very difficult, and I guess it's not the easiest of tasks. However, it is very therapeutic and calming. Well, for most of us. Oh, I was out of shot there and nobody told me. So I've gone through that hole created by the previous stage. Just because it's in the way. Trimming, you can do it at the end. However, just as it's in the way, I'm going to trim the bit of thread from the initial knot immediately so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So and it's got slightly twisted, which is not good. So what I'm going to do is do it again. I don't want that twist, so I want to go in there. Make sure that this is on the right side of the spankers. Right, and now you have those two lines which are very clearly defined, going down, in, up, and through the gap that I created. And once I'm on this side, I want to go out from the inside. I find it easier on this occasion because it's on the other side of to just take the thread with the pincers, tweezers, and then just slotting it in. Shall I do it again? I'll do it again. Slotting it in. Once it comes out, just pull it. Oh, camera went a bit wobbly there. Now, as you can see, it went all over the shop. Not to worry, as long as it's slack. Just untangle it. Pull it through. It's still around that. And there you go. As you can see, from the top, it goes down, in, up, through the gap created by the previous stage, down from the inside out, and then simply back to the top, where I'm gonna again do the loop that I usually prefer doing. And now from here, so I matched so that it is now the rear is complete. So from here, I'm going up to just above the top of, just above the yard on the main masts. Again, I want to go around and under. From here, I go to just above the middle yard of the foremast. Again, around and under. Always making sure the thread goes above the yard. That's a bit too much above. So that's above the yard. And then down to the bowsprit. And sealing with a little bit of glue. So that is stage 3 complete. So we started from the back, going down inside the hole, up to there, down to the second hole inside, and then tying around there. Up to just above the yard on the main mast, down to just above the central yard on the foremast, down to the bowsprit. And this is how it should look from the back. And this not only looks very good, but it also strengthens the mast, giving it both tension going backwards and going forwards. And it mimics closely, maybe, what the rigging looked like on real tall ships. I've been told that I've been a little bit on the previous stages, maybe soporific is the word. So I'm going to try and keep up the tempo. Although rigging does involve a little bit of concentration. Stage 4, much similarly to stage 3, you will need a fairly long length of string, maybe not as long as the previous stage. However, and as this stage will look very, very similar to the previous one. So we tie a knot, keeping it very loose, and we apply this knot to the main mast, roughly halfway in between the base of where the yard is and the tip of the mast. There, just there. And apply the glue. And as just to tidy it up and clean everything immediately so that it don't come in the way, I'm gonna just trim away the excess from the top of the mast immediately. So you're left with a hanging piece of string from the top of the main mast. And what you want to do is, like in the previous stage, I'm going to say this in last, you wait to stage number 3, it's going to be more of the same. I say stage number 3, the foremast. You want to dab to stiffen up the string, and then it wants to go, you guessed it, in the hole. Similar hole on the other side, and like in the previous stage, from the outside in, there it is. Tweezers are our friend, as always. In this case, the central hanging of the string will be done across this length of rope, string. Let me use some better implement. There you go. It will go across there. Yep. So I wanted to go inside there. Just inadvertently got a lot of glue on the string. Usually try to avoid that. So as you can see, it's gone through the hole, up, and it will go over that bit there. For now, I'm going to leave it fairly loose. And use a similar method as before. If I can find the end of the... Grip it with the tweezers. Move the glue. I've already stuck my fingers twice. And you want it going in that hole from the inside out. As I said, this is a very therapeutic part of the hobby. You know, you can just concentrate on a very enjoyable task, forgetting away all your troubles and tribulations. So as you can see, I've gone over that middle bit, down through the hole, and now I'm going to go back up to where the knot started, doing the usual loop. It didn't work, the loop. Let's try again. There you go. That's what you want. Right, at this point, this end of the thread will go all the way down to the mizzen, but I need to deal, before we do that, what's happening here. So that knot needs to be exactly in the same, it needs to be exactly where the knot started in the first place. And in this case, in order to keep it in place, show him who's boss. There you go. There you go. Struggling to focus. I am going to seal it with some glue immediately, even if I'm gonna carry that length of string further. And furthermore, I personally prefer, and I believe it's also more accurate, for this to be a lot closer to the mast, so I am going to make sure it is by, again, sealing it with a tiny piece of glue. It's really best if the junction would be adjacent to the, completely adjacent, touching the main mast. However, once the sails are in, you're not going to notice that too much. And I really should have checked the tightness before I sealed the top knot, and then I could have slacked it out a bit. However, this is perfectly suitable and fine. So from the top now, if I can untangle everything. I can't. Everything is tangled. There you go. I want to go to just above the yard, and look what's happening here. What's happening is the sneaky thread is trying to go under the yard, and one thing that we've established is that's a bad thing. So I'm going to help it go above the yard, like that. You can seal that. You can seal every single knot or turn around with some glue. Probably it's easy to go to the next stage, or you can just be brave and just go on to the next stage without it. Roughly halfway through the forebit of the bowsprit, and then you seal with some glue. Trim. And that is the second stage. As you can see, it goes up and down to there, foremast on the top of the yard, down to the as you can see, it builds up, and doing it in stages is not really as daunting as you would think. I know it got fiddly and tangled in places, but all in all, up to now, quite a good result. We've taken a bit of a break. No, we haven't. Stop laughing. So, like in the previous stages 3 and 4, as I mentioned, that these 3, 4, 5 stages are very, very similar. Take almost an arm length of string. And then just let me move the ship for a second. And then you tie a very regular knot onto this. Keep it loose. And you apply this to the foremast above the yard. More or less halfway through. So halfway between the yard and the tip of the... Ooh, fell out. Boom. There you go. Glue will help it stick. And I apologize for the sniffles, by the way. So once you have this length of string tied as the previous stages, you want to stiffen up the end of the string. If I was a lesser kind of man, I could have made countless jokes, by the way, on this video about, yeah, we know, innuendo type things, but we're not that kind of people here, so we're not going to do that. So by rubbing it slightly,
behave.
and then, like the previous stages, there you go. It goes through the hole. And with the tweezers, we can catch it. And in this case, that end will go above and on the other side of that piece of string. I'm just going to do that now. Just going to let it lay there. And tweezers. So, as I said, through the hole and then above that piece of string. Now, because the previous one didn't completely go to plan, on this occasion I'm going to keep it fairly tight, although not too tight, because did you see what happened there? I'll just show you. If you tighten it too much and seal it, it's going. Can you see what happened to the top piece of string? It gets slack too much. So you want to tighten it, but not too much. This is me pulling on this string. So just where I've lost my tweezers. Moment of panic there. So now that's sealed, it allows me to, with impunity, do what I've done in the previous two stages. And use the faithful tweezers to get a grip and thread through, and this piece will then go up and meet the other end where it all started, where you're just looping it around. And this will not end on the tip. In fact, let me just seal that with a bit of glue. So you want to slightly dab a bit of glue on the tip of the bowsprit, and then you want to turn the thread around so it will just stay there. And you want to do exactly the same with the I do apologize, looking at it from, that wasn't trimmed properly. There you go. Turn a couple of times around it. We went on the foremast from the top, we went down through the hole, up through the gap between those two pieces of string, down inside the hole. Oh, I just noticed something that happens quite frequently is when the thread gets stuck on the mast. As I was saying, through the hole, up to where the knot started, down to the tip of the bowsprit, and then down to the boom. As you can see, the ship is now taking up almost finished stage. You can see how these stages of the strings will now be able to support the sprit sails, the triangular shaped sails that come with the kits, and you can just fold them up a little bit and then stick them onto those sections. Welcome back. This was meant to be stage 6. I just realized that 3 and 4 are part of the, we've done them here as part of the same stage, and therefore we have done 3, 4, 5, and 6, which included the bits to the rear of each of the masts. So that's stages from 3 till 6 complete now. So we're only just one stage to go, which is really quite quick and easy. It's also one of the stages that it's not strictly speaking necessary, but it just adds a bit of character to the bowsprit. So you want a piece of string which is not too long. And as usual, you want to make a knot. In this case, it'll be fairly central to and just to make sure that it will stay in place, I'm gonna preempt it. I'm going to do some preemptive gluing by dabbing a little bit of glue. It means you need to be quite quick and fast on the sealing of the knot. But it also means that once it's done, it's done. So as you can see, there's 2 lengths of strings either side. You want to dab some glue on the bowsprit yard, just there. Just make this go around once. I'm not sure you've seen that. I'll show you on this side, which is exactly the same. So you want to dab some glue on the end of that, and you want to go around it just the once. Yep. And then again, a lot of preemptive gluing, just a little dab of glue just behind the cat stand, which is a sticky outy piece of wood where the anchor used to go. Like that. Same thing on the other side. So dab a little bit of glue. Hold taut for a matter of seconds. And there you go. And then those two extremities you want to bring underneath, just in front of the yard of the bowsprit. Yeah, like that. We're going to do the same with the other one. So you want them to go underneath. And then you just tie them together. In a very simple knot. Simple, he says. There you go. And then dab some glue. To make them stick. And then trim off the excess because you can't really tell with it all the excess on what it looks like. So it creates that trapezoidal shape. Now the more eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that something's gone awry with this bit of thread just here. It was completely voluntary to show you what happens in case there is some kind of damage at any stage. So you can see that this was the stage which was on the rule books called number 5 that kind of went and snapped. So I'm just going to now show you how to repair that. So first of all, make sure that up until where it's integral, make sure that that is sealed off with a small dab of glue. Then remove the excess. By the way, this you can do any length that might receive some damage. You can just go and tie each piece individually. So each length can be, if needed, although doing it for the entire ship, it's a little bit tedious. But you can do, in case of damages, just repair by tying one end at the extremity that has just broken and to the bit that to the other bit. So in this case, it's, and I'm saying a bit tedious because the repairs can be, because you're trying to go around what you've already done, the stages are designed for it to be as easy as possible for you to do. And if you don't, and they are in that order for a specific reason. But I thought it important to show repairs, as you know, accidents happen. So a simple knot where the damage occurred. A little bit of glue to keep it in place with the trusty toothpick. Or in this case, I'm using a coffee stirrer, which has been cut to a very sharp end. And from there back to where it originally was. And as you can see, because of all the other stages that have already been completed, it's not as straightforward as before, just wrapping it around. You need to kind of navigate the various pieces of strings that have happened in the meantime. But there you go. So I'm not on one end, I'm not on the other end. Seal with some glue. Cut off the excess. Being careful not to cut off any rigging that is not in excess. One hand on one side. The other side. And there you go. Fully rigged, ready for the sails. As I said before, if there's any piece that has got it got a bit slack, you can, with a bit of glue, make it tighter. There you go. Rigging finished.